Hi folks, Jay with Two Guys in a Ride here in beautiful Des Moines, Iowa at the Concord d'Elegance. I'm here with Thomas Shore. Please introduce what we have here.
Thank you. So this is a 1910 REO, REO, Model G Runabout. It has a wheelbase of 78 inches, which is really small. It has spent its whole life in the state of Minnesota. It's a one-cylinder, 10 horsepower. It is water-cooled, which wasn't necessarily common back in those days. It has wood. The main body is wood. The fenders and hood are sheet metal, but the main part of the body is wood.
So you're meaning to tell me all this right here is wood?
Actually, the seat surround is a sheet metal surround as well, but the main part of the body, the pedestal and everything, is wood. The floorboards are wood. The spokes on the wheels are wood.
Well, you had said it's not just any wood; it's the original wood from the factory.
Correct. This car was stored away in a blacksmith shop for many decades, and somehow it was protected from the weather. And so this is all the original wood, except for the spokes. I did have new spokes made for the wheels, just because after 100 years, you don't want that wood to fail while you're driving. But otherwise, all of the sheet metal is original, except for one fender. I did fabricate one fender that was. It probably took me less than half the amount of time to fabricate one fender as it would have to restore that particular one. So, but the other three are still the originals, and the hood is all original. So it had all those pieces which were in quite good shape. As far as that goes, they weren't rusted out or anything like that, but everything did require a lot of work. The sheet metal was all wrinkled, and so it did take a lot of work to straighten everything out and get all the little dings and dents out of it, and end up with virtually no body filler in the sheet metal parts.
Well, I've got a question.
Sure.
Being a younger guy, REO. I only know REO Speedwagon, the band.
Yes.
What can you tell me the history on REO?
Certainly. So Ransom Eli Olds started Oldsmobile in 1901. He was forced out of that company in 1904, and then, of course, wanted to continue building cars. So he started another company, and couldn't use the Oldsmobile name because that was already in use. So he just took his initials and named the new company REO. And which we all just call REO. I don't know that he actually called it that back in the day, but we do. And so that was, and REO built. They started in 1906, built 1- and 2-cylinder cars until 1910, and then starting in 1911, switched to a 4-cylinder engine and a much bigger car, and more modern for that time at least, vehicle. And they built cars up until 1936. Many of them. High-end, very high-quality cars, especially in the late 1920s and early 1930s. They're very desirable, very high-dollar cars. In this time period, the whole industry was just getting started, and so there were many different ideas of, transmissions. This is a planetary 2-speed transmission. There were different ideas for transmissions, different ideas for steering, whether it should be on the left side or the right side, and so there was a lot of changes there. But REO kind of followed the normal conventions of the time, which was the steering on the right, but with a wheel steering, not a tiller.
Not a tiller.
Yeah.
And then before you, how many previous owners?
I have actually met and talked with the 2 prior owners, both of whom are now deceased. But the owner, two owners ago from me, bought this from a blacksmith shop in northern Minnesota in 1971. And he couldn't remember the name of the blacksmith shop owner at that time, so I don't have his name, but I know that it was in International Falls, Minnesota, and the car was stored in the back of that shop for probably, based on how little wear there is on the main parts, the piston, the connecting rods, even the things like the kingpins on the steering and things, there's almost no wear on anything. And so we think it was stored probably in the mid to late teens, just because nothing was worn out. And back in those days, oils weren't what they were now, and every road was dirt. So dirt got into everything and wore out bearings and wore out everything. So just because of that lack of wear, I think it was probably only used for a couple of years and then parked, and somehow survived. And I was able to take it from a nice old car that was, really showing its age and was certainly not presentable as a show car, but to turn it into what you see here.
Well, being over 100 years old at this point, how much time did you personally put into restoring the car?
That's a good question. I was telling somebody earlier today, I logged every hour that I worked on this car. I have a notebook that every day that I worked on it, I wrote down the start and end time, and then if I had to buy any parts, what the cost of those parts was and which parts they were. I have purposely not tallied that up. It's going to be far too many hours. I would be disappointed in how many hours it took, because it was
a piece of art.
I was trying to see just how good a job that I personally could do, and so I tracked the hours, but I didn't care, how many hours I spent on something simple like straightening out a fender and getting it perfect with no body filler. That takes a lot of extra work. You can fill dents with filler and smooth them off and go on your business pretty quickly. But if you want to really get the sheet metal shaped the way it was stamped out of the factory, it takes a lot more time than that.
Run us through here on the steering wheel and how it works, please.
Sure. Of course, the steering is just a small sector steering, so it steers very sharp. If you hit a bump in the road, it wants to turn the wheel. The lever on the side of this is the spark advance, so you have to manage that as you're driving, depending on your speed of the engine and so on. The lever on the right side, it's currently pushed forward just to keep it in gear, but that's in high gear. And the planetary transmission, if you're not familiar with the planetary, there's a drum about that big around, and there's a center gear and then a planet gear that spins around the outside. So when you pull back on the lever, it clamps the outside of the drum down so that the planets spin and you get a low gear. And then when you're going about a walking pace, you push it forward into high gear and it clamps that whole thing together, and you're running direct off the crankshaft of the engine. And that's that engine speed then dictates your ground speed. It does have this, unusual for the period, this one has a gas pedal, an accelerator pedal on the floor. Many of them have a second lever up here. Yeah. This one does not. It has a pedal. So REO was ahead of their time in that. And then the pedal that's pushed forward is the brake, and there's some detents so that you have a parking brake as part of that. The other larger pedal is reverse, and the small pedal on the left is compression release. So it opens a second valve in the engine, so when you're cranking, you don't have so much compression to fight against. And as soon as it starts, you want to pull that lever off, and then it closes that valve, and then you have full compression.
And this little box right
The box is a coil box. The black box on the left side running board is a battery box. So back in the day, there would be 2 dry cell batteries in there. This car has no magneto, so it runs strictly off of the battery for its ignition. And the lever on the coil box is to switch between the 2 batteries that you would have in the battery box. That way, if you're driving all day, you can switch to a secondary battery and not have to charge.
And you did everything minus the upholstery, correct?
Correct. I had the upholstery done. The diamond tufting is something I had never done before, so I had someone do that. And then I also had someone do the brass lamps, the finishing on the brass lamps. Otherwise, everything else was done in my shop by me, and with my wife's help too.
And then I'm assuming these pegs here are for a top if need be?
Correct. It has a buggy top, and I do have the top. I have not been putting it on for show just because I can't get it in my trailer with the top up, and taking it up and down will scuff the paint every pivot point. And so once I'm done with the shows and things, then I'll put the top on it and be protected from the sun or the rain if it ever sees rain.
If it ever sees rain.
Right.
What color is this?
This is called REO Red. It is a color that REO used back in those early days, and they used it on many of their models. This particular color, I was able to match from paint underneath the upholstery that had never been exposed to sunlight. And so we were able to scan that, and so I know it's exactly the right color from the factory. And that was also corroborated by another restoration that was done in the 1960s, where some people may remember Tom Reese, who was big into the REOs back in those days. He was like one of the worldwide experts. And when he restored his, he carefully sanded layer by layer until he got down to the original paint, and then he had his local paint shop back in the 60s just match until they got a perfect match on his paint. And when I compared the two formulas, they were identical.
It's been a labor of love.
And the pinstriping?
The pinstripe is a gold, and that's the way the factory did these particular pinstripes, according to the pictures that I've been able to research. I did the pinstriping as well, not by hand. I cheated a little bit with the striper tape, which you kind of lay a dual layer of tape on, and then you paint between the lines, because my hand is not steady enough. The wheels I actually did by hand, and you can see the difference between some of the lines on the fenders and the wheels, and
gives it character.
Yeah, and they were never perfect when they were new, but I wanted it to be as perfect as I could make it.
I'm noticing you've won a couple awards here. I see a AAC of America first prize and a Grand National.
Yes, so this has been through for the Antique Auto Club of America judging. It's the first time out at Hershey, Pennsylvania. Actually got its first junior the next year, and I can't remember where each one was now, but it got the senior and then a preservation award. And then when we had a Grand National close enough to where I live, I took it to the Grand National and got the Grand National first place, and then the following year a senior Grand National, which is as high as it goes in those kinds of judgings. It was also then nominated for the Zenith Award, also in AACA. So it was one of 18 cars competing for the Zenith in that year, in 2021. And then the National Award was just awarded earlier this year in February of 2024. And it was the Pamphylian, I can't remember exactly the term on it, Pamphylian Restoration of the Year or something to that effect, that it won that national award. And those are things that are nominated based on a separate set of judges going around and looking at the cars other than the normal class judging. And so that was nominated and received that award.
And out of all the cars you could have restored, why this REO?
Well, it's an interesting story how I actually acquired this car. It was in the estate of a local club member who passed away in 2000. And in 2001, I was not looking for another car. I've always loved brass era cars. Didn't have any at the time. All of my stuff at that point was 30s and later. But I always appreciated the brass era cars. And when I went to just view the cars at this open house of this club member, this one was just tucked in between a 65 Lincoln and a 66 Mustang, and I thought, that's small enough, I might have a spot for that in my garage. And so I was able to buy that from the estate, and it was one I felt just needed to be restored. It was complete enough that I had to fabricate some parts, but it was quite complete. And so I really wanted to make this the best that it could be. It's probably the best restored one-cylinder REO in existence. I've seen several. I've probably seen, out of the 7 that we think are left, I think I've seen 4 of them, and most of them are driven. They're nice and maybe older restorations, but they're driven, so you get the typical rock chips and scuffs and things.
Do you have a favorite memory with the car?
The favorite memory with this one was I bought it the weekend of Thanksgiving in 2001. It had not been run in over 5 years, and when the previous owner put it away, he didn't even drain the gas out of it. He was ill, and they took it on a tour in the summer of '95, and he just parked it. And so when I bought it, the gas had all evaporated out, and the gas line in the bottom of the tank was just full of varnish and residue from the gas evaporating. And so I spent about 2 weeks cleaning that all out, cleaning out the fuel line. The fuel line's brass, and so I didn't want to just put a rubber fuel line on there. So with pipe cleaners, I I carefully cleaned out that, 20-inch.
Wait a minute, he said favorite memory.
Well, the favorite memory's coming up.
Oh, okay.
The
That sounds like drudgery.
Yeah. So from Thanksgiving until it took me about 2 weeks, and I got everything cleaned up and got it running, and within a couple days, December 19th actually, I remember it. December 19th of 2020. Of 2001. It was in the 50s at home. In the 50-degree temperature range, and so I loaded my wife and my daughter in the car, and we went for a ride around the neighborhood. And then, of course, with a one-cylinder car, you hear this whoosh sound every time it fires. Pretty soon, all the neighbors were out in the street, and we conned one of them into taking pictures of us. We put on Santa hats, and with my daughter standing on the back, we got our Christmas picture for that year.
Oh, amazing.
So that's probably the favorite memory for this car.
Any big plans for the car coming up?
Well, we're here at the Des Moines Concours this week. Next week we'll be at the 10,000 Lakes Concours in Minneapolis, and after that, I'm not sure. I'd like to drive it a little bit more, but I also don't want it to deteriorate. So there's a little trade-off there. So we'll see.
Well, thank you again.
Thank you
for showing us. Thanks for watching.